This just in, Facebook's oversight board decided to uphold the previous decision to suspend former President Trump's access to that platform. He remains, of course, permanently banned from Twitter.
So that news comes on the cusp of Trump's newly launched social media platform from the desk of Donald J. Trump. It features videos and statements from the president. Users do not have the ability to reply directly, but they can like and share to other social media accounts. Editor-in-chief of The Real News, host of the Working People podcast, Max Alvarez, co-host of The Real Line podcast, Marshall Kossoff, join us now to discuss.
That's a dreamland. You can only like and share, but you can't reply.
Well, he's basically invented blogging, so congratulations. There's been a lot of blog jokes, all of that said. Marshall, what do you make of the Facebook decision? So just to be clear here, the oversight decision is a independent body of experts and other legal people that Facebook has sought. They have upheld the Facebook decision, but they are saying that the indefinite penalty that the company has imposed must be reassessed. They have given Facebook now 6 months to re-examine the, quote, arbitrary penalty it imposed on January 7 and decide the appropriate penalty. So 6 months from now, we're going to be back discussing the same thing. What do you make of the whole situation? And ultimately, where do you think Facebook's going to end up 6 months from now?
Yeah, this is really interesting because it's a kind of honest evaluation in the sense that it's saying, look, we're not going to go back and make a judgment call on banning Trump after January 6th. Every single person on that board, Facebook critic or not, likely would have made that sort of decision. But the part that they're also acknowledging is the quiet part that everyone has clearly known, which is that whether it's the New York Post article with Hunter Biden, whether it's the Trump bans themselves, this was just arbitrary in the sense that there wasn't an actual process that Facebook had laid out beforehand that could have come to adjudicate the really difficult and complicated question of how long and how big of a punishment should we offer the president of the United States for misusing our platform. So that's the part that they're just acknowledging. And now what they're basically telling Facebook to do is you all need to come up with an actual articulation of why moving forward the long-term ban part of this makes sense. And then one just quick note on the blog thing, Sagar, I think it's funny. Even on a blog, you could reply. You could reply to a Substack. So this literally, it's. I don't think we even have a word for what this exactly is.
Like a shitty 95 messaging board or something like that.
It took him like 3 months to get this up and running.
On brand.
Like you could have just opened a Substack in an afternoon and it would have had more functionality.
That's
but
right.
Anyway, I digress. That is very on brand. Max, what do you make of the Facebook decision?
I'm perplexed by the whole kind of arrangement of this, right? I mean, and I guess because it speaks to something that we've actually been talking about at The Real News, where tonight we're hosting the second live stream in a partnership with Project Censored about power and censorship in the digital era. And I've been looking into Facebook quite a bit. And I think that one important point that's come up in these conversations is that, you know, if you want to see the lie behind this sort of supposed division between the private market and government, look at big tech, right? I mean, they work very much in tandem in a way that you can see in this sort of independent body that was overseeing Facebook's decision. In a way, the government itself has kind of punted the responsibility for determining what the metrics are for banning and censorship to Facebook. I mean, like, and it's given Facebook an incredible amount of power to do so. And I mean, this affects everybody. I mean, this is really something that, you know, like the right and the left, like, can really kind of have a conversation about. Hell, I you know, run a nonprofit independent news network. We are constantly worrying that Facebook is going to do what we've seen it do before, which is algorithmically downgrade independent news sources and boost kind of mainstream news sources, effectively shadow banning, you know, like more people than, you know, those on the right. And we really, I hate to be, you know, a broken record, but the people really have no sort of oversight over that, no real input. Like, it's all black boxed technologies that are being left to the decision makers in these sorts of private companies that are driven by profit motives. That's a very dangerous situation.
What do you make of this politically, Marshall? Will this lead to any sort of, quote, techlash from the right? I think there's going to be a lot of rhetorical posturing. Is there even really a solution to this? Or is this ultimately just people are pissed that Mark Zuckerberg has power?
Yeah, well, before I get to that, I want to start with agreeing and then disagreeing with Max. So first, I want to agree that the platforms are, and this is what the advisory board was hinting at, the platforms are incredibly arbitrary. There clearly are no actual rules that are being implemented, and they're just making these decisions day to day. I think this would be less objectionable if at the very start of the Trump presidency, there were clear standards that were set out that everyone could see and that everyone could understand the decisions. But on the second point, there has been no punting on this question by the government because total disagreement, there's absolutely no daylight. There's no agreement between the left and the right on these questions. At the end of the day, people on the right think that Facebook shouldn't have the ability to moderate its platform to the degree that it does, and people on the left do. If you look at what the left's critique of Facebook and Twitter is that these platforms are too actually open, that there are too many QAnon groups, that there's too much COVID-19 misinformation, and the right says the exact opposite. So punting would suggest that there was any actual consensus, and the government had just said, so we'll just throw it to Facebook. No, the reason why Facebook continues to have this power is because of the First Amendment. They have the right to moderate their platforms however they see fit. This is just basic case law. This isn't even a Section 230 issue. But on a broader level, there just is no actual agreement. And until you get to a point where people on the left and the right could say, hey, we agree that this is what the limit of moderation is. We think that this is what censorship is. Until you get any agreement on those two questions, you're not going to see any form of government action, nor frankly should you, because that'd just be another culture war issue.
Well, and Max, I think to your point of why people on the left should be very uncomfortable with this is that Trump, one of the most powerful, well-known people on the planet, and taking him off of Twitter and Facebook, it's really worked. He's very little in the news. His influence is much less, even
Google
within
search traffic
the Republican Party. Google search traffic has plummeted. We'll see if now with his amazing new social media platform, if that turns things around. But color me skeptical that it's going to. So if it has this kind of effect, if deplatforming really works and has this kind of effect on someone as powerful and well-known as Donald J. Trump, what does it do to activists? What does it do to people who don't have that amount of power to push back and still get their voice out there? And you and I both know the way that this censorship works. They come for the right and then they go for the left to make sure that they're being fair and balanced in this. And throughout the course of history, it's been the left overwhelmingly that's been censored and silenced and sanctioned. So that's why this is so dangerous if you're a leftist.
It is. I mean, I think, and that's I think anyone who disagrees with that is being a little disingenuous. I mean, I think we all hopefully recognize that. I genuinely don't know what left Marshall is talking about. I mean, maybe I'm just
center left,
lost in my own echo
Liberals.
chamber.
The liberals,
Center left. Okay.
The mainstream of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I mean, I think because that's a really important distinction to make, right? Is because we were having this sort of debate about no platforming. I mean, when I was co-founder of the Campus Anti-Fascist Network at the University of Michigan, a few years ago, right? We were having the debate about no platforming at universities and so on and so forth. And there's a really important distinction to make because there were a lot of criticisms even from the left about this sort of approach, saying if you try to kind of no platform anybody, you're going to empower, the powers that be that are going to turn that back on you. My response is they've already been doing that. We already know that's happening. That actually happens way more often than people acknowledge, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But beyond that, right, I think that what, anti-fascists and a lot of others who commit to the question of no platforming or the tactic of no platforming are saying is that we don't want to kind of empower this top-down entity and constantly be begging it to censor the people that we don't like. We want more community say over the people who come into our home, right, and spread messages of hate, possibly inciting violence against us, right? I mean, it's like if someone comes into your house and starts spewing, Nazi propaganda, do you have the right to kind of tell them to get out, right? That was really kind of the thorny question that was happening. But I think where there is potential agreement here is that granting the power of this sort of censorship in an unaccountable, untransparent, private entity like Facebook is bad for all of us, and we should have more kind of democratic accountability in that system.
Yeah, really well said, guys. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thoughtful
panel. Great to see you both, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Next on Rising, Brianna Joy Gray. She's going to discuss Biden's backpedaling on free college and more when Rising continues.